Hi, SAS listeners. Welcome to another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast, coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. I'm your host, Dave Markel, and this is episode 151. This week, I'm honored to bring you an extraordinary guest whose story is as inspiring as it is harrowing. Kimberly Toms is not only a survivor of multiple violent crimes, including rape and an attempted murder by a U.S. Department of State special agent, but she is also a business consultant, film producer, director, writer, and advocate dedicated to systemic change for survivors. Kimberly's experience sounds like a movie screenplay, but the sad truth is that none of this is fiction, and Kimberly didn't create this horrific story. After moving to Milwaukee in 2013 for what she hoped would be a new beginning, she was violently raped by a man who abused his position of power. Over the past 12 years, she has endured not only the trauma of the assaults themselves, but also relentless failures that reflect the very challenges many survivors face when perpetrators hold positions of authority. Kimberly is also the force behind Not Just One, an organization dedicated to creating secure spaces where survivors can share their stories safely while driving systemic change. Very similar to this podcast platform, Not Just One focuses on addressing power imbalances, improving law enforcement training, and reforming justice systems to ensure survivors receive the protection and support they deserve. This episode is not only about survival, but also about advocacy, empowerment, and the importance of making sure no one has to face the struggles Kimberly faced alone. I can promise you, this is an episode that will stay with you long after you listen. Here's Kimberly. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
And just so my audience knows, Kimberly reached out to me through a message on LinkedIn. She found the show. And I'm going to ask you, Kimberly, if you'd tell us a little bit about that and what inspired you to reach out to me. But first, if you would, tell us about yourself.
Well, I always say I'm very Southern. That comes first. I'm from New Orleans originally, and I was raised around Dallas. And that comes into play because there are a lot of behavioral things in how I reacted to the person who offended me that come into play, things that were ingrained in me and taught as far as how to act in society. I'm the daughter of a doctor, and my mother was an interior designer and etiquette and protocol teacher on top of everything else. And that came into play. But I'm also a relative to a survivor. That survivor did not get the treatment that they needed, the therapy, and they didn't get justice. And so that is why I pushed so hard to get to a guilty verdict and get to, after 12 years, what I consider some justice. And so a lot of people don't understand why I push so hard and long. It goes back to seeing what happens to generations of families when things that are broken are not healed, fixed, etc.
Yeah, oftentimes just swept under the rug.
Right.
Ignored, yeah.
And that's part of why I wanted to talk to you so much. And I saw your LinkedIn information and a posting you had done, and I thought, oh, here's the guy I can talk to about that. You're very open as far as a lot of things like the problems I've had with policing. You're from that profession, right. So you have your experience to back up our conversation. I don't like police bashing. That's something I never do, even though I've been very offended by police along the way. Yeah. And my offender was law enforcement. But I try and make sure that people are aware that I do not believe that those few bad apples are the bunch. They just bring shame to the bunch.
Right, absolutely.
And I think that's important for us to be able to solve some of the problems and move forward as a society. I'm working very much off of things that were broken generationally, generational trauma, and then also the new things I learned along the way and the fights I had to fight that I really want to help fix through conversations like the one we're going to have today.
Yeah. Well, you've already brought up several things that are going to feed into my questions for you. I want to go back first off to your background that you mentioned you were born in New Orleans. How long did you live there before you moved to Dallas?
Well, it was a very roundabout journey because my father was in medical school in New Orleans when we were down there. My family has a deep Louisiana heritage all throughout Louisiana. We came into the country at Jamestown, and both sides of my family settled the country.
Wow.
That's why it's hit me so hard about the police problems that we'll talk about is that my forefathers were here for the reason of founding this country. And so it breaks me when things are going awry.
Yeah.
And that also put a lot of fight in me for this. So my forefathers came to Jamestown. The family kind of migrated into North Carolina and down to Louisiana. My father, he was in medical school down there and then joined the Navy, and it was during the Vietnam era. And that took us all over. He worked under C. Everett Koop up at Philly. So I lived a little while at Philly as a child and all of that sort of thing. So we moved around a lot before going back down to Texas.
Another thing I want to kind of touch on just briefly is you finding me on LinkedIn. Have you had a chance to listen to any of the episodes yet?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The one that struck me the most was the one with your daughter, your adopted daughter.
Yeah.
And I just was able to see the evolution of you and who you are and what you're doing. And through her story and through your story. And so seeing the evolution of a human over time, you know they're a safer human. A lot of times I've found that my story is sensational in itself. And so I end up on the end of being used for a lot of things. A lot of filmmakers and TV companies have tried to use me through this journey. And I've had to shut certain projects down that other people thought I was crazy. I could have bought a house if I didn't shut them down. Instead, I've had to do that because they were in it for the dollar bill. Right. And so it's important to me to really weigh who I speak to and make sure that they are an evolved human, or at least one trying to learn along the way.
Yeah.
So
that makes so much sense to me. The last thing I want to do is exploit guests on this show. So one aspect of us talking together today that really makes me feel comfortable is the fact that you reached out to me instead of the other way around. I don't want you to feel used. I want you to feel safe. I want this to be a platform where during this entire conversation, you feel safe and protected and honored. Your story is important to all of us that are listening to this. It's something that I think you hopefully will grow from in being on the show. And I know my audience is going to learn a lot from you. And so when you reached out and the few emails we've had back and forth, it just seemed like such a perfect fit. So thank you again for being here.
I have to mention too, I'm really excited because as you were saying that, it just hit me. I'm speaking to a law enforcement officer and I'm not trembling. You know, it's been such a hard journey that I can't be in the presence of a law enforcement officer without physically showing it. So every once in a while I may start trembling, but it's just a physical guttural reaction to everything I've experienced.
Absolutely.
And so I'm very proud of myself because here I am talking to a former law enforcement officer. So,
well, like you said, you find yourself trembling when you talk to cops. That doesn't surprise me. I have spent my entire career trying to help law enforcement understand what it means to be trauma-informed and what it means to be empathic. It does my heart good to hear that you feel comfortable, and I want it to stay that way.
Yeah.
You're in charge of this. So, like I said before, I want you to feel like you're in charge of the conversation. It's going to go where you want it to go.
Okay.
Let's start then with that aspect of this conversation. Kimberly, what are you able to tell us about your rape or sex assault experience?
I will clarify that I prefer to use the word rape, and a lot of people find that harsh on the ears, but I think it's critical because my offender was very well aware of what he was doing. He planned it months in advance. He knew he needed to protect himself ahead of time for the legal liability of what he was going to do. At the end of it, he immediately started apologizing for it. So he's very aware of what he's doing. So this is no doubt, it's not a mistake made by a flawed man. It's a rape. And so I appreciate that you're open to using that word.
Absolutely.
So basically, I met this guy through a dating site. He told me his name was Jake and that he was a real estate property manager. And that was in March of 2013. I had just moved to the Chicago area and I was trying to get my foot on the ground as far as socially, etc. I had nobody up there that I knew. I was looking for work. The company I had worked for in Utah had sold. And so I was going from being a chief marketing officer of a big company down to looking for my next opportunity. And so I left Utah to do that in Chicago. And I just wanted to be in one of the country's best cities for my craft. I did what I did when I moved to Philly and the San Francisco area and other parts of the country for the same reasons. And I added myself to a dating site. On that dating site, I'm going to say it's match.com. I've informed them that I'm going to use their name, when I talk about them. I say that because it wasn't like it was one that was more provocative, where people are looking for something quick and fast and instant. So I added myself to the dating site, and Jake in real estate was just very aggressive in trying to meet me. What I learned, it took about 5 weeks, I think, 4 or 5 weeks before I actually met him in public. I stood him up once, something I've never done with another person in my life. I always grew up believing that you give people a chance, but you treat them with dignity. And I would have told him I'm not going to show up if I had felt safe saying I'm not going to show up. Something in me was nagging at me not to even meet this man. And it's very strange because he was so charismatic. There's that word everybody always hears. He was so charismatic. He was friendly. He was intelligent. He seemed very kind, but something in my gut was telling me don't meet him. I met him May 3rd, right before Cinco de Mayo, 2013. We met at a restaurant. I tried to do everything safely. I tried to park my car away from his car when I saw him standing next to his car. I tried to do everything by the book as safely as possible. Yeah. And what I didn't know was he had already started researching me through law enforcement channels before we even met. Because also what I didn't know, and what I found out within the next few, probably 30 minutes, was that he was actually a federal agent for the U.S. Department of State, a special agent. He further lied to me when I pulled his identity out of him, his true identity. I went through all his badges, his license, his building ID for the State Department. I made him show me everything. And he was wearing his sidearm while drinking. He always wore his sidearm even while out having cocktails. And I knew in that moment that's not cool. But I made him show me everything to prove who he was, because how am I going to believe him when he's told me his name's Jake and he's in real estate? And then now I'm finding out he's David and he's a special agent. But he told me he was a supervisory special agent and handed me a business card with that on it, with his gold badge embossed on it. Only April of this year, 2025, 12 years later, did I find out from the feds that he's not even supervisory. That was a card he had made, and It wasn't even authentic. So everything was false.
Wow.
Yeah. So that started it. He started stalking me. I'm not going to get tied up as much into the stalking routine, but I fled the state of Illinois within 3 weeks of meeting him because he was stalking me so intensely. He was bankrupting me. I got kicked out of my living arrangement with my roommate because he was driving my roommate crazy. I was living in hotels. I was trying to do job interviews and he was sabotaging those. He was just clamping down on me so hard, like a rabid animal. I could not shake him loose.
That whole feeling, just as you're talking about that, brings up to me just the aspect of your daily life, probably starting off even when you woke up with this, oh my gosh, what horrible thing is going to happen today? How am I going to get away? Before you go into that, tell me though, if you could, what was that gut feeling from the beginning that said, I shouldn't even meet with this man? Tell me more about that if you could.
I just got chills when you said that because that gut feeling was so strong that it was even a voice. And I at times thought, am I schizophrenic? What's happening? But I was driving my car into the parking lot. I'm just full body chills right now. I rarely tell anybody this because it's where things get into the fantastical realm and it's where you open yourself up to people judging you. But I'm going to say it like it is. I was driving into the parking lot and I got such a weird feeling. And I thought I heard a voice in the back seat of my car that said, there he is. And it was just like that. And I was like, who? What is it? And who is that? And so I started thinking from the very beginning, I'm losing my mind because I'm hearing a voice talking to me. And I've always attributed that to maybe my grandmother, deceased. And people have told me I have angels around me. Maybe it was an angel,
Yeah.
And there's some religious, spiritual components to his acts that I'll get into. But, I have felt protected to a certain degree, but I was hearing a voice. talking to me.
Kimberly, I am so thankful that you brought that up and that you mentioned that spiritual aspect. I'm a spiritual person. I have a strong belief in being aware of, like you said, guardian angels, those kinds of things. I don't want to get too deep into that. I don't want to offend anybody, and I certainly don't want to pry. But I also think it's important that you mention that, and you said that you've never mentioned this before. Thank you for that trust, first of all. It means everything to me. For the sake of my audience, there are so many people out there who are going to relate to that and say, oh my gosh, absolutely, I get that. Tell us more about that feeling, that gut, that voice, and what your response to all that was on meeting him.
It shocked me, and that's sort of what made me drive to another parking lot. Now, first of all, how did that voice know there he is? And then I look up and there's a man standing there. How did the voice know it before I knew it? And so there's little components of it that were so eerie to me. And so I would say, oh, it was my subconscious, but my eyes were pointed this way, driving. How did they know to look over here? And that he was there, so there's just a lot about it that was very strange. Like I said, is what pushed me to go into the other parking lot. And referring back to what you had talked about, he was probably, you were stressed upon waking. He immediately after that meeting, and as part of all of this, started a regimen of texting and calling me on a cycle, 8 a.m., noon, 5 p.m., 11:30 p.m. every day. And so there was so much physical and mental exhaustion that was created through this, the stress of it, and I couldn't breathe. I was only getting 3 to 4 hours in between each conversation of me being yelled at or whatever to gather myself for the next affront. And so the voice that took me to the other parking lot, basically that's the faith and the voice that I was clinging to, the feeling that I was clinging to in those moments of exhaustion was, help me get through this. Nothing else is going to help me get through this. It really seemed like he was from a darkness that I hadn't experienced before. And it was all penetrating. It was the phone calls. It was the investigating me and taking down my license plate number. And so that gut instinct, I had to convert it from raising the red flags and trying to get me to see the red flags to help me survive this. And so that gut instinct, I had to rely on to stay alive.
Kimberly, you used a word just now that just actually slammed me in the face, that penetrating aspect of what he was doing. And I think back on the hundreds of cases that I investigated like this, that, it's penetrating, it's immersive. He immersed himself in your lifestyle in ways that altered your normal living. Tell me, though, also, another part of what you said already has intrigued me. How did you mine out of him who he really was? What gave you that power to do that thought process, and what was the mechanics behind that?
I'm good at sniffing out honesty and dishonesty. So he said something that was so creepy, and it was a pivotal moment in this whole 12 years. He said, they all look like you. And I said, but who looks like me? And he said, all the women that I go for, they're blonde, have blue eyes, and pale skin just like yours. And he was so physically animated when he was saying it. He was bobbing his head and snorting, kind of like he was excited and getting overexcited. And I always tell people it was like you could feel him salivating. But that's the kind of thing that you hear of in serial offender movies. It's just straight out of a script. And so upon hearing that, I thought, okay, there's more to this guy than a real estate property manager. And so the excuse I used with him for this is not happening, I do have freedom of choice. I don't date real estate property managers, is what I said to him. I just said it very flatly. I don't date men in real estate. Never have, never will. And that's when he came out with who he really was. I even knew when he tried to pull one over on me and say, I have to use a false identity for my work, etc. I had dated an FBI internal affairs guy. I had dated, very briefly, I had dated a CIA contractor consultant who worked on nuclear warheads around the world. I come from a military background. I know when people have to use a false identity and when they don't. Yeah. And if you're dating, you're not wearing your sidearm, if you're drinking alcohol, and you're not using a fake name to somebody you're bringing into your life. That's what 14-year-old boys do when they're playing games. It's not real.
Kimberly, the fact that you picked up on all that and did and said what you did is just amazing to me. And to your credit, way to go.
On one hand, thank you. On the other hand, I faltered. From there forward, I faltered because it was my country that hired this guy. And so from that point forward, it introduced just enough doubt in me that I knew what I was doing, that I started having that little voice in the back of your head that you always hear that's like, oh, give him a chance. Maybe it is legitimate. Maybe you are too full of yourself and you don't really know what you're talking about, Kimberly. And so that opened the door of doubt, was because it was a federal badge.
So tell us more. How did this evolve?
Well, tricks and that cyclical routine, that daily routine started immediately. My roommate, within 3 days, I think, wanted me out of his house because my phone was ringing so much and I couldn't turn it off. I had a son in high school in another state graduating, and I had 2 daughters in another state, and so adult daughters. And so I didn't feel comfortable just turning my phone off, but all night it was texts and calls and all throughout the day. And I couldn't concentrate. My roommate couldn't concentrate on his work. Ultimately, he said, you've got to go. And I've never been kicked out of anywhere like that before. And so that was a gut punch that already I'm being kicked out of somewhere. You know, I'm a decent person. And from there, it was spending money, living the hotel life. Money was just flowing out the door. It just was crazy. And so he was financially breaking me. He was getting me in trouble with, you know, my living arrangements. He was showing up constantly, making demands and threats, just clamped down so hard that within 3 weeks I had fled. And that 3 weeks was a very long 3 weeks because it involved me finding out that he was surveilling me through my devices. He knew what color outfit I was wearing from 200 miles away. Just all of these little things he was doing to watch me. And then he started immediately calling me names I've never been called before, because there's no reason. I don't do things at the level for some of these words. Like, I'm not that offensive to anybody. He started calling me names and screaming at me in his daily call regimen. He started with the threats, threatening my children, threatening my parents, threatening every aspect of my life. And as a mom, you have kids who are just kind of becoming adults and starting their lives, hearing that one might get hit by a car and they'll never know who it was and they won't see it coming. You know, it just did something to me where I had to play his game and I had to make him not want me in his life. I had to be unattractive, but not in a combative kind of way.
Are you able to tell us then how this evolved into a rape?
Yes. I left the state and all of that had happened so fast and furiously. I found a job very quickly down in Texas. I went and stayed with my daughter. That job was sending me back up to the upper Midwest. It wasn't sending me to Chicago per se. It was sending me up to Milwaukee as my hub. My territory was Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, the Dakotas, and Michigan. I had to be located near an airport, and they had me registered in Milwaukee. That's near where my offender lived. He lived right up there. But he had been working on me for the whole 3 months that I was out of state and apologizing profusely and saying how he was looked over for a promotion. He thought he was going to get the promotion. He didn't get it. Somebody younger than him got it. The streets have gotten to me, etc. And so he started rebuilding that trust again. I took the bait, and I don't know why I took the bait. I can only think it was just from the relief of being gone safely in another state. It's like very quickly the rapid intrusion in my life became a memory. And I mentioned I'm the daughter of a physician. There are times people take their work home with them. I've seen my father, he wouldn't want me to say this probably, but I saw him cry over lost babies, lost children. I knew to let him deal with that, not to harass my father or bug him or ask questions. And so I took it like this person wouldn't be working for my country if he was crazy, number one. Number two, he's got some sort of PTSD or something going on. because he was socially awkward to a certain degree. I thought maybe he had some other issues that were fairly mainstream and manageable. He did mention that he typically goes to a psychiatrist, but he wasn't on his medication when he was seeing me. And it just all was like a trap for me because of my heart, you know.
Very manipulative.
I wasn't looking for a relationship, and I tried to position him as a platonic friend. We talked about that, and I said it's got to be platonic. I used that word platonic over and over and over. And I thought, because I'm going to be living right there near him, last thing I need is an angry Fed who wants to date me and isn't getting to date me. And so I thought if we could manage it like platonic friends, everything would be fine. Ultimately, my work sent me back up to what would be my hub, Milwaukee, for Labor Day weekend. And I had that weekend, 2013, to find an apartment. The Fed, David, said, well, I do manage properties for my father throughout Milwaukee. I'm a Fed. I was a cop here, street cop. Nobody knows the area like I do. I'll show you where to go live, where it's safe. And I took the bait as a platonic friend. And that was the trap. He got me alone. He got me, instead of going out to see neighborhoods he recommended while I was in the car, without my knowledge, he started driving me across the state line back into Illinois. He drove me for about 2 hours to an all-Fed birthday party, positioned me as a potential girlfriend or something. I don't know what his thing was. I was being presented in front of all these Feds who were drinking. I mean, everybody was drunk. I just maintained my sobriety. I had 1 glass of wine, and I'm just sitting there watching the scene. That night, when I was then driven back across Illinois state lines back to Wisconsin, was the night that he raped me. So I believe the birthday party setup was not only to make him look good, but it was also to acquaint the Feds with me so I wouldn't have a case. Like, I'm a girlfriend. Therefore, I can't complain about having sex with this guy because we're girlfriend and boyfriend. And everybody was drinking. When we got back to his house, I tried to go into his spare bedroom to go to sleep. I didn't have my car. I didn't have any way of leaving his house. It was out in a small town without taxi service. And this was before Uber was terribly popular. I don't even know if there was Uber. He called me into his room. He was continuing to drink. He did have a vodka alcohol problem nightly. And he called me into his room, and I thought he was just going to curse at me a little, yell at me a little, tell me how horrible I am as a human. But instead, he, as it's been described in the press in Wisconsin, brutally raped me. What I realized in the moments was, as I was looking for the badge and the gun, where are they? He's always got them. Where are they? I was looking around the room in the dark, trying to find the gun, and he was physically directing me to aim my body in certain directions. And so I realized the surveillance by video was carrying over. I know when I'm being directed. I had directed national commercials at that point. I've worked on films. I had worked on a Sony Pictures film by that point. And he was directing me, screaming at me because I wasn't getting the positions right, because I was so distracted trying to find where's the gun, you know, and I'm looking at this dresser and I'm looking at this dresser and trying to see in the dark. Meanwhile, he's threatening, screaming, yelling, saying the most vile things I've ever heard in my life. Things no woman should be told or called, and I know aren't true, but it was so hard to hear them and trying to break me down. And I was just crying profusely to a degree that I've never let myself cry before. So it's very sad looking back, because I was just tears running down my face and just hyperventilating, sobbing, but my nose was running, just running and getting all over him. And he has such terrible OCD that I knew that if he realized that I had let my nose run on him physically, that he was going to end me for that. He had his hands around my throat the whole time, and he was like moving me like a rag doll with my throat. And his thumbs were pressing on my windpipe to the point that I knew just one push and it's going to snap. He's a big guy. all of this was happening and I was seeing it just in glimmers of light. And so I'd catch the shine of my mucus on him and that focus on that for a minute. I've got to worry about that. So it was a very out of body experience. I was definitely watching the event more than I was participating in the event, dissociated. And I had done that once before when I choked on a lollipop as a child. I had risen out of my body and was watching, and it was that. So I was really feeling like this is my end. But basically, when it was over, I'm lucky to have made it through it. He immediately started apologizing. I'm sorry, I just needed to do that, basically, is what he was saying in so many words. He was very graphic. He took me into his bathroom and made me, as he thought, in his little immature 14-year-old boy mind and lack of knowledge about the female anatomy, he made me cleanse away all signs of having been forced, having been raped. So I played along, but I knew enough about the female body to know we didn't get it all. Unfortunately, though, he was so threatening and scary and yet so happy. He was so happy. It was like a light switch turned on in him. And I was realizing in that moment that this rage that he exhibited in this act, it had been from the start that he was building up to this. It's like everything that he had done, the stalking and the harassing, the terror, the threats, everything was like the prelude to this, to build up to it. And I found out later he's actually impotent, but the only way he can engage with a woman on his own without taking a pill is through rage. In all of these years, I've learned that everything else was just getting him to this ultimate point of his high, which is this rape.
There's so much to unpack in this narrative you've given so far. But as someone who knows about the neuroscience of trauma, I would like to go back to the initial response that you had when this first started. You're at his house, and you somehow end up in his room. What are you able to tell us about the fear factor in all of that? What was going on in your mind, and what was the impact on your body and your emotional response at the early stages of all of this?
I was trying to stay calm in the face of what I knew was extreme danger. I knew it wasn't just his rage in the moment. I knew it wasn't the potential of him physically lashing out at me. I knew there was a weapon in the room. So it was a lot of flashing thoughts. I fell back on that old Southern thing, this etiquette and protocol that had been beaten into my skull my whole life. Just stay calm and don't act scared. Try to confidently get through this and don't anger him any further. Try and diffuse it is what I was trying to do. I wasn't successful, of course, with this first one, but there was a second rape. He raped all of his victims twice. The first time out of rage and to satiate his hunger, and then the second time to bring terror and make you think it's going to keep happening if you tell anyone. You can't tell. I'm here. I've got control. So the second one, I was able to bring it down. But the first one, it was all about trying to stay calm enough that he wouldn't be further enraged or wouldn't want to kill me. He wouldn't see me as a threat. It wasn't working very well because in your mind, you're telling yourself that, but your body's reacting on its own in its own time. And so the sobbing and the gasping for air and my nose running, none of that was under my physical control. So even the noises, I was hearing myself sobbing, and the noises that were coming out of me were not even sounding like me. And so it's tragic when I look back. I remember those moments because you just want to protect that person that was going through that, because you don't even recognize it as being yourself almost, because it was so animalistic and broken, unlike you.
Are you able to tell us about the physical feelings that you had? Stomach aches, pain, issues that he had inflicted upon you during that rape that maybe now, as you look back on it, seem like they'll never go away?
Yes, I have some physical and I have a psychological one I'll mention. I'll start with the physical. it did break me physically, and it happened in the moment and then for years after. And by that, I mean, my back wasn't cooperating because I had had a compression fracture of my spine years before. So it's somewhat inflexible. And so my back wasn't bending the way he wanted it to bend. And so there was that. There was all of the sensations of the moment and debating whether you bring him physical harm or not. I was feeling his flesh at my fingertips and close to me in other ways. And I'm thinking, can I damage this flesh? And so that was difficult, and both physical and psychological. Of course, my throat, I had mentioned I choked as a child and almost died. I had to have the Heimlich maneuver, and it was just in the nick of time. After that, my throat for several days felt like it had just been sliced apart from the inside. And that's a feeling I was getting with this was, again, my throat was being damaged. Since then, when I'm anxious, I claw at my throat a lot. And I said this at trial when they asked me how I was affected. And I said, I reach up at my throat when I'm thinking about things and I claw at my neck. And it's like I'm still trying to get the hands off of my neck. And the judge actually said she didn't believe me. But here it is. I'm in year 12, almost 13. I mean, I still claw at my neck to the point that I'll leave red marks all over my throat. And so if I'm uncomfortable, that's what I'm doing. All of those things I was feeling. But at the same time, there's a certain numbness. I've experienced a lot of physical repercussions from this that I can get into. But first, I do find it really important, back on the spiritual thread. Something that's probably affected me the most out of this is he used to wear a necklace that was, he said it was platinum. I think it was silver. But it was the patron saint of law enforcement, of first responders, St. Michael. And he wore that on a necklace. During the rape, he put it in each of the victims' mouths. Now, there were double digits of us. It wasn't just me. And I remember the taste of it. And I remember the metallic copper penny almost taste. But the offense afterwards, that how dare you take a spiritual thing, an icon, Archangel Michael, that you don't even believe in. He doesn't even believe in God and spirituality. How dare you, as an empty soul, take something, my iconography, from my faith, and assault me with it? That has been so much harder to bear than anything. And so I still look at that and I realize that in my mind, spiritually, that St. Michael was there with me the whole time. He was being used to offend me. And I haven't really spoken much about that because obviously it makes me very emotional, but it's just so deeply offensive in a way that, you know, he did so much other stuff to me and I don't get emotional, but you cram my spirituality into my mouth because that makes you feel powerful. And he did it to the other women, brought it up in trial too. It just so deeply offensive in a way that, was this premeditated? I believe so. But what makes a person do something like that? So instead of breaking me in that moment with that, like I think he intends to, you know, I think he has thought about it just enough as it makes him feel powerful and therefore makes us feel weak. That's what made me rise up. Between that and knowing that not being healed, not standing up and using my voice would keep me down, those things combined to make me want to, excuse me, but kick his ass in the justice system. But that's one of the things that I remember the most is, and that strikes me, the taste of it. I can sit here right now and I taste it like it's in my mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you've heard of it or not. There's a psychologist that specializes in trauma, specifically sex assault trauma or rape trauma, and Bessel van der Kolk. And he wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. We could talk for hours about those sensory recalls, those sensory memories that are embedded in you. I'm going to guess you can remember how that room smelled.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
His smell. I don't know if you can ever really describe how a human smells, but we all have our own smell.
Yeah.
You know, between a combination of the laundry and the our fabric softener we use in our colognes, and it was his domain. It was his bedroom. It was his bathroom. It was him. So it was the smell, it was that taste, and more than anything, it was the light play. It was the light coming through the blinds.
Right.
He had these windows of a 1970s house. I'm thinking it's got windows up at the top of the room, and how the light was coming in, and that's how I was catching the glimmer of my mucus on him. And it was this light dancing mixed with the taste of the metal. And I feel the sheets on my back as I was moved around, and as he got up and walked around and moved me by my throat. So it's like the physical body takes a second position to all of the sensory stuff that you're seeing and experiencing.
That is so true. In fact, I'm glad you brought it up. If I could do a little aside here for those in law enforcement who are listening to this, I harp on this a lot, and I really want to emphasize that the sensory impacts in trauma are recorded first in the brain memory system and the deepest. So those 5 sensories, there's actually 6 sensory perceptions besides the ones that we're all familiar with, the smell, the sight, the sound, the taste, the touch, but body positions. And you mentioned that yes. You could tell you were being directed, and yes. you could feel in your body and have memory of those positions. Mm-hmm. And so those things are recorded strongly, very rapidly, and deeply in a way that impacts you to this day, mm-hmm. and will probably help keep you alive if you are ever assaulted, strangled, raped again. Those instincts will kick in based on what you did to stay alive.
Well, I will say, without trying to fearmonger, I am told he'll be back, and he does show up. He has shown up. I live in North Carolina. He's in Wisconsin. He brought another law enforcement officer down to execute a car chase for 13 miles. He showed up at my mailing place my fake address, where I mail my packages and everything. He showed up at my grocery store. And I say show up. See, I'm giving him the grace of saying that he shows up. I saw him at my grocery store. No, he stalked me there. And so I kind of get mad at myself for saying he shows up, or I'm giving him too much. He's very offended. He just came off probation. He got a 7-year sentence and just came off of that about 3 weeks ago. And so this is kind of where the fun begins again, I guess you could say. But I've been in touch with the right people. And so if anything does happen again, I'm ready for that. So you mentioned that. Another thing you mentioned was that the body doesn't forget. Well, I had a dormant genetic condition that, it's marked in your genes. It's not necessarily destined to be if it's in your genes, called HLA-B27 inflammatory arthritis. Have never seen it in anybody in my family ever, in my bloodline. Great-grandparents, grandparents, cousins. I've never heard of it in either side of my family. But for no apparent reason, one time, for 5 months, I couldn't walk across my own apartment. I couldn't walk from my desk to my kitchen or my desk to my bathroom. Through a very long journey, found out that this autoimmune disorder, this arthritic condition that's pretty severe, has flared in me, but it's not flared in anybody before me in my family. I think it's a direct result of all of this. I think it is the trauma. It's manifested 12 years of court stress, investigation stress. And I've never said this out loud where my offender could hear it. And I know he will hear this because that's how he operates. But I go through periods of time where I can't walk. I know it's because of everything that my body went through and the stress I went through afterwards trying to go through the justice system. I'm getting better. I'm learning how to manage it, but it's extremely painful. It affects my lower limbs, my feet, my ankles, my Achilles heel tendons. Imagine trying to run from somebody and you're in a flare and your Achilles aren't working. So it's been a lot to go through, but I believe it's a direct result of the flaring of it.
There's no doubt in my mind either. And there is so much research out there now that backs up what you're saying, that mm-hmm. the impacts of trauma, specifically rape, sexual assault trauma, the impacts are deep, they're widespread, and they impact us for the rest of our lives. All the physical things that you probably even go through to this day that probably even activate issues in your body physically that you can relate right back to the rapes.
Oh, yes, for sure. From your teeth, I had to have teeth removed and replaced, and I had braces for a very long time as a child. I had all of the orthodontia and other dental care that I could have possibly wanted or needed. And after all of that, because of the stress and just the grinding in my sleep and from the nightmares, the night terrors, I even experienced some last night. I'm still experiencing them.
Yeah.
It's funny because different stages, even that with night terrors, they manifest differently. And right now, since he's been released, I'm going through a phase of where I'm seeing shadows on walls, like somebody's walking by.
Yeah.
And so he's always present. And I cannot stand that he's able to reach me from so far away, but he's always present.
And it does. It immerses and penetrates to the physical that you've just mentioned, but the research shows the psychological impacts, and we could go into that for hours, but also in our daily, not just rituals, but how it impacts how we come across to other people. It impacts our jobs. It impacts our capability of progressing in getting promotions, in our income capability, in our educational capabilities. Rape impacts every single aspect of our lives.
Yeah, for sure.
The fact, Kimberly, that you're sitting here willing to talk about this and doing such an amazing job is so commendable. I thank you so much. And I do want you to know from the bottom of my heart, I am so, so sorry for the experiences that you've been through that put us together this way. But at the same time, I'm so, so thankful that we are talking, that you are willing to be on this show and to share these experiences. I know you're helping people by doing this, so thank you for that.
I appreciate that so much. It's so hard when people say, I'm so sorry. I always jump and say, it's okay. It's not okay. You know, and only in the past few months have I started saying, it's not okay. You know, quit saying that, you know. So even as you were saying it then, I was very quick to almost want to say, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I need to stand and say it's not okay, or else nothing's ever going to change.
Right.
This all could have been solved back in 1990 when he committed against his first victim. It could have been solved then when he was a city cop using his city cop weapon in his city cop car to stalk a lady in her apartment way back then. When he called 911 and faked a crime so that he could get into a woman's house to try and date her. He faked that somebody was trying to break into her house. Wow. He's been using terror against women and his badge against everybody since the 1990s. I really need to say that police officers need to police themselves, because if you've got a guy next to you who's this off kilter and creepy and nuanced in his criminal idiosyncrasies, you can pick up on it. All it took was one dinner. We didn't even eat dinner. It took 3 olives and a martini glass for me to figure some of this out, to see that he was a serial offender. It's just mind-blowing to me that he sat next to guys doing surveillance for hours on end for his special agent job, and they were that close, and they didn't pick up on this stuff. Crazy.
Crazy is an understatement. It really is.
I haven't mentioned, and I will mention just for the sake of both continuity and to show how this guy thinks. Like I said, I was raped again. Yeah. I didn't give him any reason for rage in his eyes, so he is impotent. He had to take a pill in order to execute that. I pulled it down. I was able, because of the first one, and I saw what the truth was, I was able to pull this one down to where it was a fumbling, embarrassing act for him. He made a fool of himself. He even fell backwards off the bed. I made him nervous with that one. So I kind of considered that a weird feather in my cap that the second attempt, he raped all of us twice. But they wouldn't charge on that second one because it was so much less compared to the first one. But then he also did follow the pattern of so many police officers who get themselves into trouble with women and set me up to shoot me. Those voices that had kept me safe all along finally snapped me to realizing what was happening. I made it through that too. And that was using his service weapon. He pulled his service weapon out of his trunk of his vehicle. This is his fantasy life. He gets off on these things that are so criminal and so far beyond where the average person would even consider taking something. Like, he doesn't know when to quit. Mm-hmm. So I've seen all of that side of him, and it prepares me for what I believe will be one more big attempt to do something in the next few years.
That in and of itself, the cringe factor in that overwhelming fear has to be a part of your daily life in anticipation of something that you think is coming, and makes sense that you would think that, and makes perfect sense to anybody who has been raped, especially more than once, to know that that possibility is very, very much alive and real.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was going to buy a house where I am now, and I was really looking forward to that. I told one of the federal agents on my case. She was not supportive. She said, "You're going to be stuck in it. Basically, if he comes looking for you, you're stuck there." And so I took that as a cue. So my life is so limited. And I could live beyond the limitations, but you start thinking you have a death wish if you live beyond the limitations. And so it's this weird balance. Yeah. Everything I do is so calculated. Every time I leave the house, my guard is up. I'm ready. So it's affected every single thing I do, unfortunately. And it's hard to have people in your life because you don't want the people around you to get hurt. And that's where all the threats went, was immediately to people I cared about.
Sure.
I have a little dog right now. I keep kicking myself saying, why did I get attached to this dog? Mm-hmm. She's going to be the target. And so I'm very calculated in everything I do. Until the day he dies, I'll be calculated. I know that.
The fact that you've said all of what you've just said, it's hard to hear, but at the same time, I'm thankful that you said it, because there are so many people in my audience who are going to relate so deeply to who you are, what you've experienced, what you're experiencing, and what you fear you're going to experience. There are people in this audience that are going to sit there listening to this and go, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly what happened to me. The fact that you're willing to talk to us about this on this platform is so helpful. Thank you again.
I appreciate that.
It's critical that we normalize this conversation. Mm-hmm. We have such a problem in this country, in the world, with rape culture. And you talked about that judge not believing you when you said, I still claw at my, yes, the body keeps the score. Yes, that's real. Yes, that has an impact. And yes, you better learn these things, judge, because you're ignoring a critically important aspect of understanding what evidence is. Mm-hmm. And psychophysiological evidence like that is so powerful. Jurors can relate to it.
And they did.
Obviously, because you did get a conviction. Are you able to talk to us about that process?
Yes. In fact, I think it's important also to say that the judge's words that carried through to the press were, after I got the guilty verdict, in her sentencing, she said, it's not like he held the knife to the neck of somebody he didn't know and raped them. So number one, she's saying the gun in the room is not a threat. The badge in the room is not a threat. The physical strength is not a threat. And she's saying, because I knew him, he wasn't a threat. And you think of what percentage, see, it's blowing your mind, because the vast percentage of rapes are acquaintance rapes.
Yes.
And not to mention all of the abuse, child abuse. And so for her to say that as a judge, it told me exactly who she is. Mm-hmm. She also, for the other two ladies who went to trial at the same time as me, I don't know what happened. I wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but they were called liars. And I know in my heart of hearts, I know they were raped, because he's got the clear MO and the pattern, and he says it himself. And what they went through was what I went through. But she called them liars. And it's my understanding one even had to write an apology letter to the court. And I just think about, it's hard to think about, because as much as I'm trying to heal and go forward, I'm constantly wondering, are they even able to heal? Are they beating themselves up? Are they okay? And she just said it so flippantly. Mm-hmm. And he's in the appeals court right now. He's going through the appeals process. And because of the way the judge handled the case, and because of the weak prosecution trying to try it as domestic violence, which it wasn't. None of us lived with him. I didn't live closer than 65 miles to him at any point in my life. They tried it as a domestic violence situation. Because of all of that, I believe he will win in the Court of Appeals. That's just going to fuel his energy further. He's going to reoffend. But I worry about the other women because they were beaten down so much within the courtroom. And I was hard on those other women too, because they did certain things involving me that were risking my case. Too much communication among the women, and I pushed back. And I regret that, but I had to do it to get a guilty verdict.
Do you have contact with those women at all?
I feel like I can't do it because one of them in particular is very weak to him. I can't have that 1 degree of separation because I'm the one who got the guilty verdict.
Yeah.
I'm the one who he's seething over the most right now. I don't mind taking punches for the team, so to speak, but I need to be able to concentrate, have a clear head, and stay focused. And I'm afraid if I get too close to the other victims, double digits of us, these aren't the only ones I know of that the feds have told me about. If I get too close to others, then I make myself even more vulnerable.
Right.
I get sloppy.
I get that.
Using my voice is important because it is healing. One area that people don't often believe is 3 therapists were detrimental. 1 helped me. That's important, that even therapists can be flawed.
Mm-hmm. Kimberly, what are you able to tell us about your healing journey?
You know, again, I grew up as the daughter of a physician. So there's a certain comfort I have with being around therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, because they were always around. I see no shame in it. I think that's critical because what happened was within 2 to 3 weeks of the first rape, I started looking for a therapist who could help me. I went through multiple before I found one that was successful in helping me. So it's not an easy, quick fix. You have to find the right one. But I think that knowing that I was going to go through some serious fallout from the rape, even before it was hitting me, I would say the worst PTSD didn't even start until I moved out of state and was a year away from it. Immediately starting with therapy was critical for me getting through this.
You knew that innately?
Yeah, in my bones. I knew somebody broke me and I need to fix me.
So it didn't come from somebody saying, hey, I can tell you're messed up. Hey, I see some problems. You just knew.
Yeah, I don't even think I was feeling the effects of the rape first. I was in extreme denial. I was trying to get police help and I was being rejected right and left. I went through 8 officers telling me no before I finally went to Washington, D.C. So I was just getting rejected by people and devalued and demoralized and just feeling like it was all my fault, the typical things that the victim feels, the survivor. Mm-hmm. I even had anger toward the word survivor. I still felt victimized for so long because I was still stuck in it and couldn't get help. And so I recognized that, but I was still going about the motions of my daily life, working my job and traveling for business and socializing with other people and not realizing that the fallout was there. It was just a ticking time bomb. I got into therapy just because I knew logically that it had hurt me so deeply and that something was going to come of it. It was going to happen. And part of this goes back to that relative I have who went through childhood sexual abuse and the fact that they didn't get enough treatment and it upended their whole life, their whole lifetime and affected everyone around them. And so I didn't want to be that either. I wanted to give myself sort of the cushioning I needed to experience the fallout safely.
Yeah.
So,
what are you able to tell us about the type of therapy that you're receiving, or are you still in therapy?
I went through it for 7 years. Now, multiple therapists. I won't sugarcoat things in that the first therapist I found believed that because he was a federal agent that he was right and I was wrong.
Wow.
Left that one very quickly. The second one I invested about 3 weeks or a month in, and I was seeing him at least weekly, and I didn't realize he was a minister of a specific religion as well. But I was having night terrors that were starting, and I was seeing a shadow person at night, and he told me I had a demon attachment. And so it went to that extreme. And so I was, whoa, I just invested all this time filling out the forms for cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever. And here we are, me having a demon attachment. So I had to change from that one. And then I found one in Illinois who just came across as a guy who wasn't going to believe me. I judged the book by its cover, and I thought, well, I'll give it a few sessions, but I don't feel comfortable telling this guy I was raped. So I approached it as sort of a relationship gone awry, gently, and felt the guy out a little first. He actually recommended I bring in my offender for a couples therapy. Now, this is before the rape thing came out. Took him in. I convinced the Fed to go in with me, David. The therapist used the words, Kimberly, this man is going to murder you. Do you hear me? He's going to murder you. And he just kept repeating that when I was again alone with him. And so he actually saw the sociopathy and the craziness. And then I felt comfortable saying, and he raped me. It took some nurturing, and I was manipulative with this therapist. But after the demon attachment and the other one, I felt the need to be so careful.
Very protective, and that makes perfect sense. And you did an amazing job of it if you got him to the point where he was seeing what you were seeing, and it made you comfortable enough then to bring up the fact that you had been raped by him.
Yeah, it was hard to say I've been raped, not only just to say it out loud to myself. And I don't know what words I used. I probably used sexual assault, or I probably used he forced me. I didn't use the word rape for another year after that. This was about 3 months after the first rape had occurred. And this therapist said, okay, we've got to get you out of there. We've got to help you figure out a plan to be safe. We've got to help you, you've got to get out of this area. So he, after that, snapped to attention and was extremely helpful in getting me through things. So he got me sort of through the, I guess you say, the triage, the most important safety factors. And then after I relocated down to North Carolina without telling anyone where I was going, I then started looking for a therapist who would help me with EMDR and that sort of thing. I never did find a therapist who helped me with EMDR. I found general counseling, but the one EMDR therapist I was able to get an appointment with, I went to 2 sessions, and on the second session, she had been so excited about doing this therapy for me, and she then became afraid for her daughter's life. And so she told me, I can't do this. I'm having nightmares. I can't see you. And so I was so just beaten down at that point that I couldn't even find a therapist who wasn't afraid. It was kind of a fiasco, but eventually through COVID and the changes that happened in therapy at that time with more teletherapy, I was able to find 2 who really helped me through 7 years of just close attention to all of this. Regular talk therapy. One by one, we worked through every issue as I encountered them, and that helped for 7 years. That was great.
Where are you now?
Now I'm really good. I'm functioning very normally, except for my constant awareness that I have to be careful with some things. I am, I think, a little too careful at times, and so I'm trying to break out of my shell and use my voice in ways I haven't used it before, be open to talking about things I haven't talked about before. I'm here with you for that reason, to speak more clearly about my truth, I guess you could say, nuances of it. So I'm challenging myself all the time, but the night terrors are the one part of PTSD that I have not been able to heal. They manifest in different ways at different times according to what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And right now it's just shadows of like somebody's rushing past me as I'm sleeping, and it wakes me up. And I could swear I see shadows on the wall. I could be seeing shadows, but I can't tell for sure because I've got PTSD. And so it's a crapshoot every night. Am I going to sleep? What am I going to wake up seeing? I do walk around at night. I had never done that before. Stand up and yell at somebody that's not there. I have thrown pillows. Whatever's on my end table, I'll pick it up and throw it. So I keep my dog in her kennel at night, her cage, her bed, her luxury suite. So she's safe from whatever I'm throwing. Yeah. And my cat has learned I'm not necessarily safe to sleep with.
Where has this put you with interpersonal relationships?
That's the tragedy of everything. That's the tragedy. It has damaged every interpersonal relationship that I had that was important to me. My children are not speaking with me at this point. Not because of what I'm going through now. It's not because I'm very much living a normal life right now, but they were angry with me that all of this happened. I've never even been able to find out if my offender called them. I know my son received phone calls from somebody, and I screamed at the feds in Washington about this. Somebody called my son, somebody's threatening my son. That happened a little bit, but, you know, as a mother, I'm pretty disappointed that I've sort of been abandoned in this.
Yeah,
I understand what fear does to people, but I really wish that my children would have a conversation with me about it. Just an open conversation so that we could talk about how they felt about it, how it affected them. But the rug was pulled out from under me. I was married twice, and my two ex-husbands got together and used it to their advantage. They went from one state to another and met, had conversations. It was a tragedy that happened to me, and they used it to their advantage. It's just disrupted everything, but I'm still holding out hope that they'll learn, my children will learn in their own time that I did not cause this. I did not bring it about. I never dated around my children because I was divorced from 2003 forward, and I never dated around them because my father was a doctor who took care of children who were abused. I knew not to have strange men around my children. And so it's not like I had man after man coming into their life. No man ever came into their life. And so at the point that my son was graduating from high school and my daughters were already getting married and having their own babies, for this to happen, and then there's just no conversation about it. Yeah. It really has been hard.
It sounds hard. Yeah, it sounds extremely difficult.
They'll figure it out, I think. I'm holding out hope. But if they don't, then I'm just riding on faith and spirituality at this point.
Sure.
I'm just glad to be alive and for us to have that chance for a conversation. Yeah, their fathers definitely took full advantage. My other family, one sister said something that was so shocking to me that I don't know if I can ever be around her again. I had to shut down that relationship, and it basically was making fun of the short sentence I got. And she works in a certain field where she should know better than to make fun of the sentence I got, especially since I was up against the judge that was on this case that clearly had some issues. Yeah. The fact that I was one of just over 2% to get a guilty verdict is miraculous.
Yep, it is.
I praise that jury every single day of my life, and that says a lot. So then to make fun of the short sentence of 7 years just was something that I cannot come back from, I don't think.
Yeah, I get that.
I can't be around that kind of person who is willing to kick somebody who's so far down, who gets a shining light of a victory, and then to just stand in front of that light and block it out and say it's not good enough. You know, it just was not okay.
Yeah.
So I don't have relationships.
You laugh, but that's sad. I know those are, it hurts too much to cry kind of laugh.
Yeah. Well, I've cried so many tears. I know in my heart that I've done everything a human is supposed to do with this. I stood up against a monster, a real monster, and I got a guilty verdict. Even if it's reversed through the appeals court, I have nothing to be ashamed of.
You don't. You're right.
And if my loved ones cannot see that, then that's not my malfunction.
That's true.
I can still love them from afar.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's very benevolent of you. You know, that says a lot about who you are. It truly does.
One of the motivating factors for me to survive was hearing myself think, nobody will look for me if I die. Nobody will catch him if I die. And I just could not be a Jane Doe who was stalking a federal agent as he wanted it to look like. You know, he was setting me up to look like that. That's part of taking me to the all-fed birthday party. Just knowing that it would have been dropped and he would be free and nobody would ever say anything was motivation enough to not let him kill me.
Yeah. Wow.
It's not always pretty.
It's not. None of this is pretty. But it not being pretty is why this podcast exists. People need to hear this stuff. and we as a society, as a community, as listeners and participants in this podcast need to do is do all we can to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sex assault and to normalize the conversation. Yeah. We've got to get rid of the rape culture that our society is so mired in. Yeah. Kimberly, if you would please tell us, what will you do after this conversation is over and over the next several days, weeks, and months to take care of yourself as those intrusive memories and some memories that maybe you didn't even know were there, those implicit memories that may pop up as the result of telling your story and talking about all this, how will you handle all of the things that are coming?
Well, I always know now to prepare myself before something like this, an interview like this, as well as after. So it started yesterday. I started slowing down. I had nothing on my schedule for today. I took my time getting dressed and pampering myself this morning. I listened to a lot of music this morning. So I put myself in a very calming headspace this morning for this. And then it carries over to afterwards. I know how it hits me. I will feel victorious throughout tonight. I'll feel very proud of myself.
And well, you should.
I'll take my dog for a walk and, experience more quiet. I know to do that. And I know that tomorrow I'm going to be feeling, I'm not sure exactly what it is that I feel, but it's definitely a darkness. It's not depression or anything like that. It's just the shock of all that's happened to me affects me. And so I have to let it sink in for a day, not have any obligations. And so I know that for tomorrow, again, it's about walking my dog, cooking for myself, and just doing things that are sort of self-care. And then I get back to my regular life on, I guess, 2 days later. But I know now, after enough experience, that I can't just bounce back and jump back into life. It's better for me to just take a lot of quiet time out in nature in particular.
Tell us about that nature connection.
Oh my gosh, it has run so deeply throughout this whole thing. Hiking, going to the beach, all of those kinds of things were my act of defiance from the very beginning. Anytime I could get alone out into nature and feel connected with sort of the grass under my feet or the sand under my feet, the beach in particular has been a lot for me. Watching wildlife, just traveling day trips, going out into state parks. I went crazy for state parks for about 10 years of this. I went into every state park I could in Virginia and down into North Carolina. So I kind of became even an expert in the history of Virginia, the state parks there, because I spent so much time chasing the outdoors.
Great.
That's very important to me. It reconnects me to my faith and my spirituality and myself. It really grounds me, and that's my healing.
I'm really happy to hear that you have all of those things in place and that you know yourself and your situation well enough to know that there are things that you can do both ahead of time and afterwards that are going to help you through this. I also want to emphasize that you are now part of a community. I hope you find some commonality with some of the other guests as you listen to some of those other episodes and also feel confident in connecting with some of those people too that you feel a connection with.
Oh, absolutely. So, I'm more open to connections now than I've ever been because I feel healed enough to connect. And then also I've basically developed a platform with a business associate, and we've developed a company that focuses on helping victims tell their stories, survivors tell their stories. We're working on that project now. So I want survivors to come to me and to come to our platform. It's called notjustone.org and sign up with us. And we're already having success in finding ways for some of the survivors who've signed up with us to use their voices. We connect them with journalists, podcasters, researchers, people who can really help make change in the world and amplify the voices of survivors. Wow. And through that, I find the healing that maybe I don't get through my family connections or through other places that you would expect to get it. And so I welcome hearing from people, and I really want to help others amplify their voices, whatever stage they're in their healing.
That's amazing. That is so good. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I did see it in some of the literature that you and I have exchanged, and some of the research that I've done. This not just one is an important aspect of what you're doing. And I would really like to see SAS, this podcast, collaborate with you and help that project to reach out to not just one and get the help they need that way from you and your organization.
I would love it, and you're definitely going to be hearing from me some more. So
absolutely, I'm glad to hear that.
It's going to go both ways for sure.
Good. I would love that.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. Well, Kimberly, it's really going to be hard for me to stop this conversation, because as I've mentioned, I think we could talk for hours about so many of the idiosyncrasies of what it means to be a victim and survivor of rape. Your willingness to talk about it and the way you've talked about it in such a raw and honest and transparent way is extremely helpful to those in my audience that will hear this episode. And I really want to push this far and wide. I think people need to hear your story and hear what it is that you're doing to help others as well as yourself in moving forward. It's been amazing having this conversation with you.
Well, it's been very nice having a dialogue as opposed to me just telling my shocking story. So it's nice to have a two-way conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. My deep gratitude and respect go out to Kimberly for being with me on the show today. Kimberly, your resilience and ambition are truly admirable, and I'm proud to have had the honor of your presence here this week. And thank you for what you're doing to help victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. I look forward to the progress and ongoing success of Not Just One. And to you, my SAS listeners, thank you for being part of today's show. I'm truly grateful for each and every one of you. Drop me a quick email if you appreciate what's happening on this show, and let me know if you'd like to be a guest and share your survival story and healing journey. My email address is in the episode notes. Don't forget to tune in next week when I'll be bringing you another brave survivor with their story of strength and courage in their healing journey. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember to start by believing when anyone tells you their story of being raped or sexually assaulted, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.